Welcome to Xencelabs Creative Life Series, where we're weaving together the common threads of life as a creative professional by connecting the dots between our stories, health, processes, and growth. On this episode, we're talking with a woman who has an amazing story and is taking mental health and pain management to a whole new reality, virtual and augmented reality to be exact. Today, I'm excited to welcome Deepa Mann-Kler, CEO of Neon. Deepa, welcome.
Great to be here.
Deepa, your TEDx talk, Becoming Human, brought tears of empathy and inspiration to my eyes, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on our channel to talk about who you are and what you're doing. Would you mind giving us a little introduction of you?
Sure, thank you. So I run a immersive company which creates apps in augmented and virtual reality. And I'm also an artist. I also have a very keen interest in equality, diversity, and inclusion. And that's a value basis that feeds through all of my work. And then I also sit as a board member on organizations, so the General Medical Council, the Public Health Agency, and the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland. I'm also visiting professor in immersive futures with Ulster University, and I think that is about it.
So you're a woman of many different directions, kind of pulling, it seems like, a lot of things all together so that you can really just talk about human beings. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. My career path has developed organically, and I think there was a particular shift in 2016. My father passed away on the 1st of January in 2016, and that's, I mean, I think when we lose a parent, it's a significant life moment. So obviously a lot of grief, but out of that grief, I experienced virtual reality sort of 11 months later, and it was quite experiencing it was a surprise. I'd gone along to a Bjork installation, but hadn't anticipated the impact that it was going to have on me. It was as if it had lifted me out of myself. And that, as a creative, kind of made me think, I really want to play with this and to find out what I can do with it. Which led me to setting up my company Neon in 2016, and then working with a software company called Kainos in Belfast. And we developed Retina, a fun VR experience, which we took out to South by Southwest the following year. So within a space of a few months, everything changed. And preceding that point, I had been painting quite a lot, but I found it really hard to kind of be on my own in the studio and to sit in that grief. I wanted to work with other people, and that's been the really interesting thing about being in the virtual and augmented reality space for me as a creative, that I get to work with amazing teams of people who are really passionate about what they do. And it's the creative process has stopped being solitary all the time. And this is what I've needed over the past 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, I find, in my own life and in the lives of people that are around me, when you've experienced something traumatic or grief, it opens these cracks of light that shine into the gifts that you have to give to the world. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened to you, and it brought you to this place where you are now. And it's really interesting. I'm so curious, like, how did you even begin to find people to work with in virtual reality? Did you just do a Google search?
Yeah,
how did you find that?
Much. That was definitely the first step. Virtual reality Belfast. So 2 places came up. One was a local university, and then this company Kainos. At the time, serendipity, I was chair of the Crescent Arts Centre in Belfast, and that organization was directly opposite Kainos. So I asked the chief exec for an introduction. He had already met, and it just went from there. So looking back, and I have looked back a lot over the last 5 years because it was so life-changing. It was one of those meant to be moments. and being in the right place at the right time, that this company was looking to take something out to South by Southwest. I arrived at my first meeting with over 30 ideas of the things I wanted to do in VR. And then kind of had to be, pulled back a bit. It's like, you can't do this, you'll make everybody feel really sick.
Oh,
But, so the steep learning curve, but I think that's what's really nice about the immersive space. There is such a community in terms of everybody wanting to help each other, because I mean, VR's been around for a long time, but it's taken on a new momentum, I think, over the last 5 years, and augmented reality in the last couple of years is really beginning to come into its own. But there's just a nurturing, sharing spirit I've found amongst most of the people that I work with in this space. And that's also what I really, really enjoy.
wow. Yeah. I love how you keep mentioning community in virtual reality. And I think that's something that people are starting to visualize when they think about augmented and virtual reality, is that it doesn't have to be like your eyes are closed and you're all alone in this other world and like you're escaping this reality that we're in. It's maybe something a little bit more. Can you speak to how community might be something that's of the future of virtual reality? Is it?
Sure. I mean, there is with virtual reality, you are sort of covering your face as a human being. And we know through COVID, in terms of face masks, just covering the lower half of your face, how much natural communication you lose. So there's something inherently inhumane about doing that. But for me, my starting point, I think it's what your starting point is. So what problem are you trying to solve is the first question, and then what is the best solution for that. I think what tends to happen sometimes is people get really excited and starry-eyed about the tech and they jump to the solution without really looking at the problem. So I think if you have a sort of ethical approach, and a step-by-step approach, that can really help in terms of what you then go on to develop. So I think as human beings, we crave shared experiences, and we have all sorts of virtual worlds being created, with Fortnite and people going in to have these mass shared experiences. But sometimes, say in terms of medical or therapeutic application, we can create things that do need to be experienced on an individual level. So after Retina, I got really interested in virtual reality and for therapeutic benefits and pain management in particular, and started reading up and researching work that people like Walter Greenleaf and Skip Rizzo and Brennan Spiegel and Karen Bullock have been doing, for years and years and years. And then attended a pain hackathon with two really talented developers. And we came up with the idea of combining the very human act of your breath, but putting it in a VR environment so that you affect the VR environment. So we breathe 23,000 times each day as a human being. And it's our first, I think, line of defense and medicine in terms of the human body. But often when we're in stress or we're in pain, we go into this shallow breathing, which is directly the opposite of what the body needs. So the Breathe VR was very much about encouraging people to breathe deeply. They're in a meadow, they make the leaves rise and fall. And its success for me is that you do this until it becomes something natural for your body. So you don't actually need the tech, so the tech is there to enable people to be more human, but the success is to remove the tech. So you create almost a muscle memory around that. And what's really interesting about combining it in VR is that our brains process visual information 60,000 times faster than text. So we're not even aware of the processing that's going on. So you're combining some really, really powerful processing elements in the brain Like, and for me personally, I do a lot of deep breathing and meditation, but I have a particular position I go to with my hands and fingers. So if I'm, say, outside of the house, or I'm in a meeting and something feels a bit off, or I don't feel comfortable, I go into that pose.
Mm-hmm.
And it immediately, my body remembers that state,
Right.
and goes really quickly into that state. And that's really, really nice to be able to do.
Yeah, I know that's the hand signals or signs or a body position is really
Yeah.
common for different meditation practices. I have kind of a similar thing that I'll do something with my hands, or like a motion, or a movement, or a position that I like to sit in, depending on what type of meditation I'm trying to do. And I find that exactly it takes you to that place. So you have these breathing virtual realities that help people with mental illnesses or pain management, or is it kind of, is that the only one that you have, or what else do you do? I'm curious.
So Breathe VR came out of, I suppose, my mother lives with acute pain and has done for over 30 years. So, and seeing her in that pain, and medication, never really getting rid of it,
Mm-hmm.
I guess was the personal motivation in terms of wanting to find out more. But as I started to do more research, we created the demo, we tested it. The feedback was people just found it really relaxing, just to be in this environment, and wanted more environments.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be able to interact, don't we, in effect,
Right.
whatever realities we're in, because that affirms that we're alive, we're having impact as human beings. So since then, I've also created, I worked with a local hospital to create an augmented reality game for children undergoing chemo and cannula treatment.
Oh, wow.
And VR wasn't appropriate there because the kids need to be able to see what's going
Mhm.
on. So they need to be able to see their hands. And that was like a whack-a-mole type AR game that you play on your iPad. And then we've also developed a prototype called Talking Sense in Augmented Reality, which was about helping parents with children with autism to understand their behaviors better.
Mm.
And we created a scenario using artificial intelligence and machine learning, where the parent is interacting with a character called Ben. And it's about how you queue up and prepare Ben to be ready to go to bed, and what you need to be communicating, the simplicity of the language that you're using, and really, really, not contradicting yourselves. And when we did the testing for that, the feedback was really interesting, in that this is actually a really useful tool for all parents, or parents of children with autism, if they're leaving their children with carers, an extended
Mhm.
family. And other work that we worked with Bernardo's and young adults with learning disabilities.
Mm.
And it's a piece called In My Shoes. And it's a piece where young people speak. It's a 360 experience. They talk about how they are disabled by society, not by what is termed their disability, but because of the way society perceives them and interacts with them, and the way that they're treated. And that's quite a powerful piece. I'm nearly wrapping on another virtual reality piece where I've worked with people suffering from ME, and it's chronic fatigue syndrome, I think is what it's called in Canada and the States.
Mhm.
And that's been really, really interesting, because about 20% of people who suffer from COVID are experiencing long
Mm.
COVID, where the
Mm.
symptoms are really, really similar to ME. And this was a group for years who were told to exercise their way out of the condition, which
Right.
is the worst thing you can do.
Right.
So I worked with a group called Fibro for Me, run by this amazing woman called Joan McParland, who's had ME for 27 years. So that's a training piece that's been created to use with health professionals. And then I launched a couple of augmented reality apps as well last year. And they're a bit, well, one's fun and one's focused on peace building.
Wow, you are really tackling like so many different directions. How are you, like, where are these coming from? Are these your brain children, or of, neons, or, who's coming to you and saying like, we need this? And what's the inspiration behind that?
So sometimes, I mean, I'm approached. So the ME piece, Joan reached out to me and said, look, I really want to create something in VR. Can you help? And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course I can. So I helped in terms of the funding application. We got funding from NI Screen.
Wow.
The piece with young adults and learning disabilities, that was a commission from Bernardo's, the charity. And then it's funding calls that are put out. I have a natural interest in terms of wanting. We're in the R&D phase, I think, of AR and VR, so it's almost as a creative, I'm getting to play, but sometimes you can play in also it's having a higher purpose.
Right.
So the autism AR was around that. Now, the peace building one, that came out of a conversation with another amazing woman called Eva Grossman, who runs the Center for Democracy and Peace Building. And there happened to be a funding application open with the Arts Council and with Future Screens in Northern Ireland. So it was the 75th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima last year. And the proposal was to look at the different approaches to peace building between Northern Ireland and Japan. I mean, Hiroshima, just the research I did around it, it was just devastating, the impact. And, the fact that people and life survived heat that was 40 times greater than the heat of the sun just is staggering, absolutely staggering. And there are trees, 170 trees that survived the atomic bomb, which are commemorated and actually have plaques on them and have fencing built around them. So we developed a story, an idea of a seed from this tree, and we used the crane as a symbol of international peace building. And Hiroshima made a concrete decision that it wasn't going to be backward looking in terms of peace building. It was going to be forward looking. And that's been their whole mantra throughout the peace building process. And in Northern Ireland, we're not there yet. There's still a lot of pain and hurt. And I think it will still take another 3 generations. So we were meant to fly out to Hiroshima. I got funding for 4 of us, and then COVID happened.
Oh, no.
So we ended up creating an animation. But out of that, I got to work with a really young company, students who formed themselves into a business because their placement fell through. And that's a whole other story in terms of knowing that if I give this opportunity to this company, it's going to be really meaningful for them at this stage of their development. And it's been an amazing process because the 3 people that are in that company are just so passionate and professional. So that app is experienced at one of the peace walls in Northern Ireland. We have 97, and it's ironic. I mean, we called the conflict here the Troubles, and the peace wall is not a peace wall, it's a wall of division to keep people apart. Right. And there's a really famous one in Northern Ireland called Cooper Way, where a lot of tourists come from all over the world. So there's a stencil of a crane, and you go into this story of a young boy on the morning of the atomic bomb dropping, and then you see him at the end as an old man in his 80s. And that generation is beginning to pass away now, the ones that did survive. So it's a fascinating story in terms of resilience. And I think it's really interesting how augmented reality, you can recreate digitally, contested spaces without disrupting the physical space. And it's almost a tool, and virtual reality has this as well in terms of world building in a safe way. So you're giving people the keys almost to reimagine alternate futures. And if they imagine it powerfully enough, then it becomes the present. So that was the motivation behind that piece.
Wow. I hear so much in your voice, like you said something about like you're interested in, but is there a sense of responsibility that you feel as an artist, or, you know, do artists have a sense of responsibility to kind of bridge these gaps between art and stories and technology and so forth?
I think you have to be true to yourself and you have to be authentic. You know, that has to be your starting point as a creative. And if you're not doing it in an authentic way, then people are going to see through that very quickly. You're going to lose interest.
Right.
You know, because it's so hard to, I mean, any creative will tell you they have a million ideas every day and maybe 0.0001% of them actually land. And then nobody ever sees the work that you put in to delivering that and to sticking with it. You know, it's not, they often see the glitzy bit at the end when you're launching it and it looks really exciting. So to have the energy to stick with it, to realize a project, it has to be authentic. So for me, I don't think about it as a sense of responsibility. I know I'm really tuned into my own value basis, you know, because of the family that I grew up in. My father was a local politician. He was the first Sikh Lord Mayor in Leicester. My mother was the first female Indian trade union representative in her factory, and she had to stand 3 times because of the racism, you know, and they both experienced so much racism when they first came to England. So there's been a really strong grounding in terms of my value basis, and my father telling me, you know, on the night before I was leaving for university, you have to be 3 times as good as everybody because you're a woman, because you're Indian, and because we're not rich. And that's always stayed with me. And then, you know, as you journey through life, you're constantly sort of, I suppose, an indicator of a success for me is being able to be yourself and not being defined by how others perceive you or how others feel it's comfortable to define you. But that's been a growing kind of experience, you know. So I haven't answered your question. I don't think it's all.
No, but it's so, what you're saying is like to be authentic to yourself is really the main thing, is that within all of these things that you're doing, that's part of your personal mission that you have. And that is what keeps the creativity coming and keeps you working and probably keeps you from being burned out when things are hard. This is really important. This is what I'm passionate about. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a nice way of putting it as well, because part of that value basis is being kind to myself, you know, and self-care and self-love. And, you know, we tell our close friends and families we love them, but we have to say that to ourselves as well. So it was fun. My daughter has just finished exams and I came across her crib sheets and notes she'd written to herself and Newton's 3 laws. And I kind of wrote my alternate laws for her. One of them, don't be a DICK, you know, as a life mantra. That's number 1. There's different versions of that. Some of them are a bit more. 2, be kind to yourself. And 3, that the 3rd law was, that's all I've got. You know, but if we can really be kind to ourselves, we all have, I think, such an inner critical voice. You know, and I've had to really work at that voice in terms of turning it into a constructive voice, turning it into a learning voice, turning it into a voice that, okay, when I do things wrong, because we all do, what happened? You know, what have I learned? What could I have done differently? Is there something I need to do now to make amends around that? You know, what's going on for the other person? And I was talking earlier about breathing and that posture. You know, when I'm in meetings, particularly if I don't know people, you're trying to get a sense of the room and reading the room and understanding the atmosphere. doing all of that, but trying to do it in a more of a conscious way, and that's come from being younger and feeling uncomfortable at times and not really understanding what was going on. And it's that constant desire to try and understand as much as possible the person that's in front of you, actively listening, and not having answers written out beforehand so that I look clever. There's all of that going on, but I think if there's one thing we can do is just to be kind to ourselves. And when you meet people, they sometimes share their pain. I think you just, and that's what you're thinking and feeling for them as a fellow human being. Lighten up on yourself. You're doing good.
Right.
Hard.
You would never say anything that you say to yourself to one of your close friends or your family. You would never in your wildest dreams say, ooh, I don't like that. That's not done enough. That doesn't look right. You're never going to get there. Like, you would never say that.
Exactly. And sometimes also saying it's good enough. What you've done is good enough. It's never going to be perfect. And that's been really important. And also, I suppose, trusting in your judgment as a creative when you've created something. It's taken me a really long time that I've learned that the way I tend to see and interpret the world appeals to some people. And that's okay, because there's a lovely Venn diagram I saw a few years ago. So one circle is egotistical maniac, and the other one is crippling self-doubt. But where they overlap, that's where the creativity happens. And I think that's so accurate for so many creative people.
Wow. I absolutely agree. And that self-doubt in some ways tends, and both of them together, they push creatives to this like perfection. It pushes them to say, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. You've got a little bit more to go. This is going to go this direction and like build something really special. You just have to know when to hands off. Like, that's the end. We don't need one more dot here.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know you said, like, when you were going to college that, your father told you you're going to have to work extra hard because not only are you a woman, but you're an Indian woman going to college. What is it like being a woman in the industry you're in as an artist in technology? How do you stay true to yourself, your heritage? What is that like?
So I suppose it comes back to the point that I made earlier. I kind of obstacles are there to be knocked down. I've never allowed myself to be stopped by anything, and I can be really creative in terms of if I have a goal and want to achieve it, and I will use my networks. I mean, I've been in Northern Ireland 26 years this year, and I've built my entire network here from scratch. And you sometimes have to be really creative in terms of your goals, because I'm not born and brought up here. So there's a lot of networks that I don't have. And, you are kind of treated as an outsider. But I think so in some ways, because XR is new, there was my timing of coming into it 5.5 years ago was really, really good. I mean, I'm over the last couple of years, I've been mentoring companies and people, and I don't know any other industry where you do that so quickly, because I was able and so fortunate to have had that range of experiences in terms of building the range of VR and AR apps and being visiting professor and working with students. So, suddenly being in a position of a mentor already, so that's been really, really good. There are deep issues within some aspects of the tech world. We've seen the news stories in terms of the blatant misogyny and sexism and bro culture, but there's also elements where there's a lot of really good people working in terms of tech for good and a really strong value basis. I'm not a software programmer, I'm a creative, but I come across a lot of women that are programmers or working in AI or machine learning and have, not had positive experiences, but these skills are in so much demand and I speak about this at conferences. I encourage women in this sector to really do their due diligence. If they're going to be joining a company, look at the women in there already, talk to them, look at the management structure, look at the leadership structure, and really get under the hood of what's going on to understand the culture of a company, because you can leave a job and walk into another job, within seconds here, because those skills are so sought after. So it's interesting within VR, there's a lot of women in this space. And there's on Facebook, there's women in VR and AR.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe because it's new territory. Young women have just been really interested in it. There's real passion and energy, and I'm not sure how or why it's happened, but it's great that it has happened, and you can connect globally really quickly. So Kathy Hackle, who's based in the States, I was able to meet her at South by Southwest. She's so well known in the XR space, or Laura Miguel, who's based in Canada and is connected to South by Southwest, So the networks are really strong. And that's the other aspect of this world that I absolutely love, are the global networks. And the connections that you can make are just limitless. And that's really wonderful. But yeah, I mean, there are issues for sure. But as a society, we have deep racial and sexism issues, but I think it's about building up a good network. It's about having those allies. It's about having a really good structure around you in terms of personal support as well, because sometimes, if somebody asked me what racism was, I would say it's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's those small insidious things that take place. And you're kind of questioning yourself, am I being a bit too sensitive, or have I read this right? And that's wrong. That's really wrong. So I think it's wrong. And I suppose one of the things my learning from that is that I sit on boards now, and I see it as my responsibility on those boards to really push in terms of an equality, diversity, and inclusion agenda, because I have a small amount of power, and it's about paying it forward. So that's really important.
Wow. I'm like, you're my hero, I just feel like you just have this wonderful energy, and this, like you said, you have this little bit of power, and you're going to pay it forward and do what you can. I feel like, when your father asked you to be 3 times better, I mean, I hope you feel this way, but you are really doing that. You are paying it forward, and that's inspirational. I love that. Could you speak to in what ways diversity and inclusivity may play a role, positively or negatively, in mental health?
So, I mean, there's so many statistics, I suppose, across the UK that if you're from a Black or minority ethnic background, that your mental health is likely to be more fragile, because you're more likely to experience racism. And it's that sense of, if you're born into society that doesn't completely accept you for who you are, then you're constantly sort of fighting to affirm who you are and not be defined by what society is telling you. And I mean, in terms of sexual orientation, it's the same thing as well. And trans people, just in terms of there's such significant issues, and all as human beings, we want to have our needs met,
Right.
and then we want to be accepted for who we are as our true selves, because that's what makes us happy. And if we're happy and connected, then we thrive in terms of physically, mentally, and our souls are nourished. It's really simple, but it's so complex at the same time. Older people, loneliness is one of the biggest contributory factors in terms of people dying, because they feel disconnected. And loneliness can be more devastating than cancer in terms of its death. It's a real issue. And we have to question that we have so many ways of being engaged with each other,
Right.
but how are we using those? How meaningful are they? I know that now, I love telephone conversations, because it's our auditory sense. It's the first sense we become aware of when we're in the room.
Right.
And it's so powerful. And as an example, music just has the power to transport us, doesn't it? Or energize us, or make us sad or cry or laugh. So I really enjoy phone conversations, because I find them really intimate and lovely. And actually, I have lost track of the question that you asked as well. But it can, and with COVID as well, I guess, over the last 2 years, one, it's completely messed up my reference in terms of time.
Right.
It's like the last 2 years are a blur. I have this before and after bit, and I really struggle to remember the last 2 years in terms of key points. And we know that COVID has exacerbated existing inequalities and created new inequalities. We know that in the UK that if you're working in health and you're from a Black minority ethnic background, it's more people have died, because they were more likely to be at frontline services and more likely to be exposed to the virus. Doctors were more likely to be in poorer areas. So there's a whole sort of, it can affect you from the minute you're born to the minute you die, and the age at which you die, the quality of life that you have. It can affect every aspect of you. So it's, and in education as well, so many households didn't have access to devices to be able to do that homeschooling properly, and some households were sharing one phone with multiple kids, so those kids have been really affected. So it's magnified, and within that as well, if we start looking at the intersectionality of identity, so if you're poor, if you're female, if your sexual orientation is other than heterosexual, the norm, the perceived norm, if you're disabled, all of these things can layer up, because society has been created in a way that is easier if you're able-bodied, is easier if you're white, is easier if you're rich, is easier if you're male. But I think we're beginning to ask questions in a way. I don't know if things are going to change, but at least conversations are happening.
Right. That's what needs to happen. I think the first steps, are like, we have to talk about it, acknowledge that this is here, and then we can come to small steps, solutions. It's a big world, and there are a lot of things to do. Are there some ways that you might, or advice maybe, for people who are struggling to find that sense of self in what they're doing and find that inner nourishment that they need?
So I suppose one, recognize it, and two, not to blame themselves, because that's the first thing people do. You're feeling bad, and I've done this, and then I blame myself for feeling bad, so I feel even worse. So just to break that cycle in terms of that thought process, to talk to somebody close to them, really, really reach out. And I mean, for me, the things that work, I cycle, and just being outside is so important. I also love walking. I love being near trees. We're lucky enough that we live near nature. So we live near the mountains, we live near the beach, and being able to see the ocean, listening to music, eating well, sleeping well, maybe not drinking as much alcohol, or, the things which can act as mood suppressants or stimulants. Sleeping properly. I don't take my phone to bed. I kind of tend to put it away about 6, and in our house, no phones go upstairs. Yeah. And I suppose now, as restrictions are lifting, creating the opportunity for shared experiences. I mean, I think it's going to take years for the fallout from COVID to hit us.
Right.
We haven't even really begun to realize the depth of despair and how lonely some people will have been. We were so lucky. We had a family of 4 together, and we all had our own devices, so the kids were able to do their homework, or everybody was able to be in a separate room, and we had a garden, and so those are small things that I would start to do, but it's so important to talk, I think, to people, and to externalize it, and to get it out, and then be kind and give yourself a hug, and start each day with a kind of focus, just in terms of, it sounds cheesy, I talk about kind of just being the best that I can be, and listening, and loving, and trying to be in the moment, and not thinking about the 20 things I have on my list. And then at the end of the day as well, like a wind down, and breathing, and relaxation, and kind of, Nina Simone said it in one of her songs, sleep in peace when the day is done, and that's quite nice. But yeah, I mean, taking care of the fundamentals.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're healthy in body, you tend to be healthy in mind. And I know that's something that James was talking about yesterday. He's like, as an artist, and especially nowadays, more often than ever, we're really right here in our computer screen and on our phone screens. And we're just constantly like sitting at a desk, work, work, work. Here we go. Go outside. He's like, just go outside. He's like, it doesn't even matter if it's, the balcony on your apartment, just.
Yeah.
It's so important to remember that we're human beings, we're of this earth, and we're connected in so many ways. And I think that what we're all going through as a collective right now is going to turn this switch, because before we were connected, but we weren't connected all together to this same feeling of disconnection. And then once we're able to really come back together, we're going to be craving it. We're not going to know exactly what to do, because I know whenever I've gone outside and like seen more than 10 people, I'm like, I'm exhausted. I'm drained from it. So we're going to have to reassimilate. And I know that that's going to be important, but I think that we're going to come out of this very connected, but in a different way. And then hopefully, and I believe this, I'm an optimist, but that in a better way and more connected than ever. I think that's really what we need, is that community, that shared experience. And I think that's really what it sounds like you're doing at Neon. And it's really special.
Oh, well, thank you. I think you're right. And I think the last couple of years have also perhaps made people pause and breathe and think about, is this the way I want to live for, the next 10, 20, 30 years?
Right. Is there something different?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's so good to be able to do that.
I know. I always say to people, change feels weird at first. It doesn't make sense right now. But when you look back months, years, whatever later, you'll go, oh, that's why. Or, lifetimes, it could be at the very end. go, that's why. And I'm hoping that we'll feel that pretty soon. I know I've felt that, and been like, oh, that's why I'm moving and I'm going. And now here's where I am. And this is what's next. And
absolutely. And one of the other things that I've had to learn to do is to say no to things, not to keep things maxed up all the time, to allow new things to come.
Right.
And I'm doing that consciously this year. There are 2 things that I want to do this year. So they might not happen, but at least I know I'll have done everything I can to make it happen. It won't be because I've completely overloaded myself again.
Right.
Yeah. So that's quite nice as well, and those things are exciting to me because they will enable me to develop new connections with new people, and to work towards something bigger. And that consciousness is quite nice. And then, actually traveling and meeting them one day. I think we'll start to do it this year, but it'll still be fairly tentative. Next year, hopefully, things will be better.
I have all my fingers crossed. If I could cross my toes too, I would. I think, this is what I do personally when I set my New Year's resolutions, is I pick 10 really easy, achievable things. I'm not out here like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds and blah, 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 I'm not going to eat better. How do I measure that? But I like things that I can do. I'm going to learn how to do this or do that, or roller skate, or make a lasagna, or go skydiving for the first time. I'm not going to do that, but I like to give myself a goal, or go see a play, and just try something new. And even if it's just one thing, and at least I always like to make a lasagna, because that's really good. Achievable. I can do totally. That. But yeah, I think I'm really excited to see what your New Year's goals are and where you take those.
Yeah, and well, one of them is to pass my motorbike license and to get it. Yes.
Yes.
Which is a good
ride.
one.
I ride. So.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Do. Cool. Yeah. I was like, oh, what are you gonna say? Ooh, I'm all about women riders. So do that, please. Oh my gosh, you have to do that. It is the most wonderful thing ever.
I will. So that was a Christmas present, the lessons. So I'm just waiting for it to get a bit warmer because it's so cold at the minute. Yeah,
it's cold.
So I did start to learn 21 years ago, and then I became pregnant and kind of became a mother.
Right.
So I did enjoy it. So yeah, that's a big target. And then just to enjoy what I'm doing as well. It's a really simple thing. And cycling. Yes. I got a new bicycle after 20 years. So it's, I've set myself just getting out 3 times a week.
I love that.
And it doesn't matter how. Yeah, totally. And they're good things. They're really good things. The motorbike one will be really good because it's going to push me out of my comfort zone. And anything that's a bit scary is good.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. You'll have to ask Ian. Ian knows this custom motorbike fabricators or whatever. He sent me this one gal's name. And I can't remember it. So I'll have to ask Ian and see if he can connect y'all, because she's like a photographer for races and creates custom bikes, and her and her husband have this whole custom bike company. I think it's in Belfast or something. So I'll have to ask him about that, because when he was showing me it, I was like, can I meet her? I'm very far away.
Wow. How long have you been riding motorbikes then?
2019, since 2019. I don't know how long that's been now. Like, what year is it? But I moved home in 2019, and I was living at home. I was living with my mom, caring for my mom, and I needed something. And I love riding a bicycle, and it naturally came into, I want my bicycle to take me farther and faster and continue on for the rest of my life. And so I took a lesson. I didn't tell my moms and took a lesson and fell in love with it and ended up riding motorcycles, and I'm obsessed. It's probably one of my favorite things to do. So.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Any tips then?
Oh, tips. Just do it. Just do it.
Okay, that's good.
Just do it. You'll fall. You'll laugh.
Okay.
You'll cry. You'll cry. You'll be like, why did I do this? And you'll just do it anyway.
Okay.
If
All right.
you fall, get back on. If it's just do it.
Just do it.
And
just do it. Okay.
The women you will meet riding motorcycles, they are so powerful. I can't wait to see you on a bike. So.
I will send you a photograph when that happens. Okay?
Please do. Oh my gosh.
I
will love that. So anybody who's out there listening, if you don't ride a motorcycle, you don't have to, but it is really fun. And maybe I think the lesson here is to try something new. And it's like what Bless said in our session with Bless and Omar. And she was saying, some people might love yoga or might love meditation, but acupuncture doesn't work for them, or massage doesn't work, or XYZ. Find the thing that works for you.
Yeah.
And run with it, or walk with it, or two wheels, ride with it. So I think that's the key here. And Deepa, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure to connect with you and bring your wisdom and advice and guidance and everything you're doing at Neon to the Xencelabs community. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's been great to meet you, and I've really enjoyed chatting. Thank you. It's lovely. Really, really lovely to have connected.
So Deepa will be back on Friday at 9 a.m. PST to join us with Omar, Bless, and James. So come join, watch live. We're going to have a lot of fun and get to continue these conversations. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.